everybody, and welcome back. We're so glad that you joined us for our study tonight. We have got so much to cover tonight. I want to make sure that we do it all justice, so we're going to hop right in. Again, if this is your first time tuning in with us, we are doing a study right now on a book by Pastor Steven Furtick called Unqualified. And tonight we're actually tackling chapter 4, and it's called Keeping It Real. Now, before we start, I want to read the scriptures that we're going to be talking about tonight. So take a look at this. It's going to be in Matthew chapter 25, verses 14 through 29. It says, "Again, the kingdom of heaven can be illustrated by the story of a man going on a long trip. He called together his servants and entrusted his money to them while he was gone. He gave 5 bags of silver to one, 2 bags of silver to another, and 1 bag of silver to the last, dividing it in proportion to their abilities. He then left on his trip. The servant who received the 5 bags of silver began to invest the money and earned 5 more. The servant with 2 bags of silver also went to work and earned 2 more. But the servant who received the 1 bag of silver dug a hole in the ground and hid the master's money. After a long time, the master returned from his trip and called them to give an account of how they used his money. The servant to whom he entrusted 5 bags of silver came forward with 5 more and said, 'Master, you gave me 5 bags of silver to invest, and I have earned 5 more.' The master was full of praise. 'Well done, my good and faithful servant. You have been faithful in handling this small amount, so now I will give you many more responsibilities. Let's celebrate together.' Then he went to the second servant. In verse 22, it says, the servant who had received 2 bags of silver came forward and said, 'Master, you gave me 2 bags of silver to invest, and I have earned 2 more.' The master said, 'Well done, my good and faithful servant. You have been faithful in handling this small amount, so now I will give you many more responsibilities. Let's celebrate together.' Then the servant with the 1 bag of silver came up and said," Now, how would you like to be this guy? You just watch these other guys do really good, and now you're coming up, and you know you don't have anything extra. It said, "Then the servant with the 1 bag of silver came and said, 'Master, I knew you were a harsh man, harvesting crops you didn't plant and gathering crops you didn't cultivate. I was afraid.'" Let me say that again. "I was afraid and I would lose your money. So I hid it in the earth. Look, here is your money back." But the master replied, "You wicked and lazy servant. If you knew I harvested crops I didn't plant and gathered crops I didn't cultivate, why didn't you deposit my money in the bank? At least I could have gotten some interest on it." Then he ordered, "Take the money from this servant, and give it to the one with 10 bags of silver. To those who use well what they are given, even more will be given, and they will have an abundance. But those who do nothing, even what little they have will be taken away." Before we start, I want to ask you a question. Who did you look up to when you were younger? Who are the people you looked at and said, "I would like to have their life," or "I would like to be more like them"? There was a few of those in my life when I was growing up. I had some really good pastors that were over me, and maybe when I was real young, I didn't look at them. But when I reached teenage years and when I decided I wanted to give my life completely to Christ at 16, there was a few people that I really looked up to. Larry Henderson is one of those, who is now a missionary in Italy. And then also in Milan, Italy, we've also got Pastor Sharp at the time. Now he's Dr. Sharp, Michael Sharp, who is now the Secretary and Treasurer of the Assemblies of God District, or Alabama District Assembly of God. Those are 2 people I really looked up to when I was younger. Now, when I was really, really young, of course, like all other kids, I looked at a bunch of different people. I looked at a lot of celebrities and a lot of people that were around me. And everybody's going to laugh when I say this, but one of the guys I watched the most, I used to love the A-Team. And the A-Team, if you don't know what the A-Team is, number one, that shows I am way too old. Number two, it shows you don't know classic TV. The A-Team was a group of guys that went around and they ended up helping people. They were discharged out of the military and they ended up helping. It was a TV show. It was stupid, but it was fun. But there was a guy on there by the name of Mr. T. Those of you that might remember his saying, "I pity the fool." All right. So he is the one that I'm going to talk about right now. And I know it's stupid, but I was in third grade. And we would play these games in school, and when you got to be the high scorer, you could put your initials in like you do at the arcade. Well, instead of putting my initials in, I always put Mr. T. I don't know why. It was strange, but it was something that I did. And I guess I looked up to him a little bit. I don't know why. He had gold chains everywhere. He had a mohawk and he had a whole lot more muscles than I do. But he is somebody that I looked up to. What is a celebrity that if you could trade places with them for a short amount of time that you would trade with them? Right now, I can tell you right now, somebody that if I could trade places with them and I could have their attributes and their money and their talent and things like that, there is no question who I would change with. And that would be Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson. Just simply because I would love to have muscles that look like that. I would love to have the work ethic that he has. I'd love to have the money that he's got. But also, he's got a great heart and he's a great man. He's not perfect, but I would love to have that. Now, maybe not a celebrity. Who is somebody that you look up to that maybe isn't a celebrity, but it's somebody that you look up to? One of the people that I think of is my cousin Tommy. Tommy Windsor, great guy, love him to death. I haven't even talked to him in years, but Tommy, when I was doing a discipleship course at my home church when I was young, I was probably 17 years old. It required us to write a letter or write a story about somebody that we admired. And Tommy was the one that I chose. And the reason I chose him was because my cousin Tommy, he has spina bifida. And he's been in a wheelchair his entire life. And I've been around him a lot, love him to death. But I would watch him on Sundays and how he would worship and how he would get into the services, and it would so encourage me, and it would so just really just touch my heart that I really wanted to be like him. So what I would do, I wrote a letter about him. So I look up to him. Who is somebody that you look up to? If you've got a comment or something, I want you to put it down in the comments below who you look up to, and maybe even tag them if you could. But comment who you look up to. It might be a celebrity. It may just be somebody in your family. It may be a pastor or a friend. Just do me a favor and comment down there. Now, we just read the whole passage about the parable of the talents. So basically, the master's going away for a while. He gives a certain amount of talents to the three servants. When he gets back, the first one's doubled it, the second one's doubled it, and the third one did absolutely nothing with it. That is the whole gist of it. But what do you think that last guy? See, the other two, they invested, they got to work with the money. What do you think caused that last guy to go, I ain't doing nothing with this money? I mean, he already said that. I knew you were a harsh man, and that you would harvest crops you didn't plant, and that you would take things that were not yours to take. So I didn't want to do anything wrong with your money because I might lose it. What made him think that? Actually, in verse 25, it tells us exactly the reason why he decided to just bury the money and not even invest it. In verse 25, it actually tells us his reasoning. And it was, I was afraid. I was afraid I would lose your money, so I hid it in the earth. Look, here's your money back. Here's your money back. There was his third word. We talked about it last week. Our third word and how it describes us and who we are. I am Aaron. I am a musician. I am strong. I am weak. There was his third word right there in the middle of that verse. I am afraid. He was afraid that he would lose the money. Now, I've got a little excerpt from the book that Unqualified that I want to read to you. And it's a perfect description about what we're talking about here. It's found on page 51 in the first paragraph if you've got the book and you want to look at that. It says, sometimes we do the same thing. He's talking about the man with the talent or with the bag of silver. He's talking about him, that we do the same thing. Pastor Furtick says, sometimes we do the same thing. We let fear force us into hiding who we are and what we've been given. We bury our identities because we are afraid we don't measure up. Can anybody say that they've done that before? I can't tell you how many times I've walked in the room. I even talked about it today with my wife and even with my pastor. I talked about it with them both, saying, I walk in a room and I automatically assume everybody in there knows more than me, they're smarter than me, they're more qualified for me, and they have more experience than me. That's my automatic reaction a lot of times. He says, we bury our identities because we are afraid we don't measure up. We are scared that if we let the real us show, we won't be good enough. We will mess things up and we won't qualify. I don't know what you're going through. I don't know who you are. I don't know what you've been through in your life. But I'm here to tell you that God did not call you because of your qualifications. He didn't reach out to you because of what you've done in your past. We even convince ourselves sometimes. We even convince ourselves that we are doing a good job by burying what we've been given. We sit there and go, see, there are so many people, we sit there and say, there's so many people that could do it better than me. Again, I said it last week, I'm a musician and I'm a vocalist and I sing. Are there people out there with a better voice than me? Absolutely. Listen, I hear people all the time that have such better voices than I do. I see people that play guitar that are so incredible. We have an incredible guitar player at our church by the name of Kurt Holmes, actually two of them, Kurt Holmes and Lee Bortfield. Both of them can play me under the table with the guitar. Just amazing at the talent that they've got. And they can do it so much better. But me looking at it going, because they're better than me, I'm not even going to show my talent. I'm going to cover mine up and I'm going to hide it from everybody else because it doesn't match their quality. That's not showcasing what God has given me. That is not investing what God has given me. We might sit there and say, well, I'm just not as talented as they are, or they have a better mind for that sort of thing. This fear keeps us from being real with ourselves and being real with God. What would you consider your best strengths, your biggest strengths in your life? I can tell you right now, my biggest strengths, number one is my drive to learn something new. One of my biggest strengths is I'm not afraid to try anything new. I'm going to jump out there and I'm going to go after it. And I'm going to learn something. When we decided to start doing videos and doing video announcements and doing all those kind of things in the technology world, I knew absolutely zero about all this stuff. I had done some little minor editing here and there, and I had done some minor recordings here and there, but Lord knows I've never sat down and done a teaching like this and edited it together and put it together and made it look good. I had never really spent time to do that. You know what I did? I went and I looked on YouTube. I looked on different places. I went and I researched articles and I learned how to use the different programs that I use. I learned how to work with worship tracks. That's another thing that I've been working with. Worship tracks and how to use them in a worship setting. Those are things that I've tried and I've tried to learn over the years. One of my strengths is the fact that I'm not afraid to learn something new. There was a trip that we went to when I was at my last church. a missions trip to Honduras, where we were building a church for a local congregation, an indigenous people's congregation. And we got in there, and I've never worked construction in my life. I'm pretty good with my hands, and I can figure stuff out, but I didn't know what to do. And they're sitting there, and this is the first time I'd ever seen them mix concrete on a concrete slab. They had taken the concrete mix and made a big well, and they poured water in it. And these guys, locals, were making concrete with it. They would add some rock to it and some sand to it. It was amazing to watch. But I had never laid brick in my life. And you know what they asked me to do? Lay brick. You know what I did? I got myself next to somebody who laid brick for a living, and I watched them. And I followed their examples, and I learned as I went. I used what I was given, my talent to learn stuff. That's one of my strengths. What are your strengths? Type it down in the comments down there. Maybe you're a learner like I am, or maybe you're a reader. Maybe your strength is your vocals or your study habits. Maybe your strength is your relationship skills. Whatever they are, type them in there. But I've also got another question for you. What are your weaknesses? That is a harder question for me, because I look at myself and I see a lot of weaknesses, and it's hard for me to pick those out, and I hate to look at them. It's hard to look at our own weaknesses. What are your weaknesses that you have? One of my weaknesses is my self-esteem. Yes, I put on a good front. I said it last week. My wife tells me that I'm an introvert masquerading as an extrovert, because I'm so out there sometimes, but I'm just as good if I'm sitting by myself in a room by myself with nobody around. And as a matter of fact, I prefer it that way sometimes. I'm an introvert masquerading as an extrovert. My self-esteem, again, I walk into a room, I automatically think everybody else is better than me, everybody else is more qualified. That's my weakness. What is your weakness? Type it in the comments down there. Let us know what your weaknesses are. Sometimes just voicing that out helps us to actually bring a sense of realization to ourselves. So make sure to do that for us. And why is it harder to admit our weaknesses than it is our strengths? If we want to keep it real with ourselves and with God, we've got to understand that last question. Simply put, we don't want other people to see the chinks and cracks in our armor. That's the reason why it's so hard to admit our weaknesses. It is never comfortable to put your faults on display. Little illustration, I personally hate to be caught off guard. And I hate for people to think that I don't know the answer to something or that I forgot something. So a lot of times when people used to come up to me and they would ask me, hey, what about this? What about this? I would make up something and just tell them. Or I would say, oh yeah, I didn't forget about that, but I meant to go get that done. And that's just part of my faults, okay? What do you think is the driving force behind someone who is a perfectionist? Think about that for just a minute. What is the driving force between a perfectionist? Someone who believes that nothing else but excellence will do. Now, a lot of people, they might say that it's because they want to make sure it is excellent. Well, yeah, that's true. The true driving force behind perfectionists, though, is not necessarily perfection itself. It's actually the fear of failure. The true driving force behind a perfectionist is the fear of failure, the fear of making a mistake. They have an obsession with never failing. Striving for the best is never wrong. Don't misread what I'm saying. Striving for the best is never wrong. But you've got to understand, don't stop working on your issue just for the sake of accepting yourself as this is just the way I am. You want to strive to be more like Christ. Be perfect, for I am perfect. Okay, yes, we strive to be more like Christ. We strive to go further. We strive to do those better things. But we can't look and say, well, this is just the way I am. We talked about it last time. Our anger issues, or maybe our weakness in our willpower. Remember that perfection is the enemy of progress. The moment you believe you've reached perfection, you never move forward. Perfection is the enemy of progress. The belief that God is more interested in our perfection than our relationship with Him is the birthplace of insecurity. Know that God accepts you with the faults you have. But it doesn't mean that we leave them where they are. God has given you talents. God has given you abilities. God has given us these things we can do. But it's up to us to actually invest them in the world around us. Because without investing them in them, then we're never going to grow. Let me pray with you. Lord Jesus, I thank you for every person that is tuned in to watch this video. I thank you that this is our chance to reach out and invest in a generation that is in front of us. God, I pray that you would let them know that they have value and that they have purpose, and that you have brought them for such a time as this to this particular video so that they can understand that you have chosen them to carry out what you have chosen for them. God, help them to understand they don't have to hide their faults. They don't have to bury their abilities. They don't have to bury who they are because they're not qualified. Because the simple fact that you have chosen them has qualified them more than anything else. We give you all the glory and all the honor in Jesus' name. Amen. Now listen, guys. We love you. Thank you so much for tuning in with us. Please join us again next time. And I hope and I pray that God will be with you every single day.